If you ever ask a German in their 30s about their favorite video game as a teenager, chances are pretty high that they don't give you an answer because we are serious people and hate fun. But if on occasion you do find someone that enjoys life, chances are also pretty high that the answer to your question is Gothic. It certainly was my first favorite game, and even though it has clunky graphics, even clunkier controls, and has in many regards aged like a fine bowl of milk, it still is one of the best games that I've ever played. But why? Why is this rough-looking piece of barely working code considered cult? And why do so many people still love it, even today? In this video, I want to take a look at these questions. I want to take a look at the mechanics, the world, and the story of Gothic to then tackle why it still is a favorite for so many people. Myself and many of my friends included. And with the release of a remake on the horizon, there is no better time to do that than right now. Especially with not only the GOG, but by now also the Steam version coming with the community-made mods you need to run it on modern PCs pre-installed. And there's also a Nintendo Switch port of the game if you feel the need to push your handheld console into a deep depression with rough code from 2001 ported to a console that's made for games where an Italian plumber and his less successful brother re-kidnap an apparently very kidnappable princess from a giant lizard and also kill all the wildlife in the land. But I'm digressing. And a spoiler warning, I guess, because I am gonna spoil most of this over 20-year-old game for you, so if you don't want that, then please just don't watch the video. And if you do want that, then please have fun. When I boot up the game and get into the main menu, I realize that I might have a problem here. I am doing this review in English and not in German, and that means that I need to play the game in English and not in German. And to understand why that might be a problem for me, you need to understand that the German voice acting for this game is very, very good. It's some of the best I've ever heard. It certainly is a big part of why the game became such a success here, and the same goes for many of the Eastern European game versions, by the way. Now that I think about it, maybe to enjoy Gothic you have to grow up in a country whose people are known for having vibrant and bright personalities, like Germans and our friends east of us. But, well, back to the point, playing the game with different voices is going to be hard for me. Especially when the acting in the English localization is, let's say, most of the time it sounds like what food tastes that a person cooked that has a decent idea of all the spices and what the food should taste like, but the cookbook they use is either from the Great Depression or just British. Here, just as an example, listen to the same conversations in English and then in German, just to see how the tone of the scene changes.
You're demanding a lot for your advice.
Possibly, but you can earn a lot of ore with this knowledge. All the animals you kill without knowing how to cut them up will just rot away. That's a wasted opportunity of skinning them and selling the fur at a high price. If I were you, I'd try to gain this knowledge as soon as possible.
Du verlangst verdammt viel für dein Wissen.
Mag sein, aber du kannst eine Menge Erz damit verdienen. Alle Tiere, die du tötest, ohne zu wissen, wie man sie vernünftig ausschlachtet, werden einfach verwesen. Das ist eine verschwendete Gelegenheit, ihnen das Fell abzuziehen und teuer zu verkaufen. Wenn ich du wäre, würde ich mir dieses Wissen so schnell wie möglich aneignen.
Who are you?
I'm the guru of the swamp. My servants call me Bonnet Beck.
Servants? I don't see any servants.
They're everywhere. The trees, they walk and skip and dance.
Oh, I see. Well, I'll be on my way then.
Wait, you can help me convert this swamp into a massive meadow of flowers.
Okay, you just got started. Me? I'll be back later. He's not going to get me anywhere.
Wer bist du?
Ich bin der Guru. Ich bin der Guru des Sumpfes. Meine Diener nennen mich Baal Netbeck.
Diener? Ich sehe keine Diener.
Sie sind hier überall. Die Bäume. Sie wandern und springen und tanzen.
Ach so, na, ich gehe dann mal wieder.
Warte, du kannst mir helfen, diesen Sumpf in eine gigantische Blumenwiese zu verwandeln.
Fang am besten schon mal damit an. Ich komme dann später wieder. Ich glaube, der Kerl bringt mich nicht wirklich weiter.
And now, let's jump into the game.
The kingdom of Murtana, united by King Robar II. During the long years of his reign, he was able to defeat all foes of his realm. All except one. The war against the orcs took its toll, and the prisoners of the realm were to pay the price. The king needed swords for his army, and every man guilty of a crime, no matter how insignificant, was forced to work in the ore mines of Corinus. To make it impossible for them to escape, the king sent out the best magicians of the kingdom to create a magic barrier around the entire valley. I was one of them. Something disturbed the delicate structure of magic. We were trapped inside our own barrier. 1 second of negligence was enough for the prisoners. Corinus was now under the control of the convicts. The king had no choice. He had to negotiate. He needed the ore. Month after month, the king supplied everything the prisoners needed. Month after month, they brought the ore to the edge of the barrier in exchange. Until the present day. Another convict was brought to the cliff. He did not know, but he would change everything.
In the name of King Robar II, bearer of the scepter of Verant, I sentence this convict to...
Stop! Convict, I've got an offer to make you. This letter must reach the leader of the Magicians of Fire.
You're wasting your time.
You may choose your own reward. They'll give you anything you ask for.
Very well, I'll take your letter. On one condition. Spare me the rest of his nonsense.
How dare you!
Keep silent. Right, send him in.
Welcome to the colony.
That's enough. Leave him alone. And now scram. Get up.
So, having been rescued by another prisoner, we get to talk to him and introduce ourselves as...
I'm Diego.
I'm
not interested in who you are.
Well, okay. We are not important and play as a nameless hero whose name is irrelevant to Diego and will be to everyone in the entire game. I somehow feel like when I introduced myself to the company CEO at my last job, but somehow this world with graphics from 2001 still looks brighter and more lively than the office that took place in. Diego tells us that there are 3 camps in the colony, which is what the prisoners here call the land inside the barrier. The old camp, the new camp and the sector swamp camp. And now we, as a newbie, will have to join one of the camps to survive, because the colony is a very dangerous place and if we want to survive, we need some protection. And again, this is like my last office job. The aforementioned protection we can get as a camp member, so we set out to decide which camp to join. For that we explore the colony and do some quests for all 3 camps, so that afterwards we can decide who we want to join. And right from the beginning, the game world feels quite alive. It feels real. For example, we meet a hunter who can teach us some things about his craft, but he wants a beer in exchange since he hasn't had one in a while, which is understandable. So we have to look for a beer and then give it to him, so then he tells us everything we want to know. We also meet a guard who wants protection money that we refuse to give him, and then we get ambushed not only once but twice because the guy paid some people to teach us a lesson. And this is like my last job again, which is becoming really unnerving by now. But back to the point, there are more of these kinds of interactions in the game and the NPCs feel real. They feel like real people with wants and needs who have their own lives inside the colony and who've been prisoners in here for years. And that makes the game really immersive. This immersion is the first thing I notice every time I start a new playthrough, and it certainly is one of the main strengths of the game. Here's another example. You don't have a minimap. Well, at least at first, since you have to find someone that draws maps to then buy one, or you just beat him up and take one, and then you can open the map with pressing M. And this may only be a small touch in the grand scheme of things, but it does a lot for making Gothic feel like taking place in a cohesive reality. While exploring the colony, you also explore the camps, and they are all pretty distinct from one another. First and foremost, there is the old camp, the oldest and biggest of them all. It consists of a castle at its center, some poorly made huts, some campfires and an arena, while being surrounded by a wooden wall. The people there are diggers, who digging in the mines, shadows, who are a kind of guard, the higher ranking guards, who are also a kind of guard but higher ranking, I guess, and last but not least the fire mages and the ore barons, who control the camp via trade with the outside world. The people in the old camp decided to just abide their time in the colony and now try to live the best life that they can. Then there's the new camp, and it's clearly different from the old one. It's built into a cave in the mountain, and the people here are peasants who work on the fields and scrapers who digging in the mines as well, but the digging joke doesn't work here. They are protected by rogues, mercenaries and the water mages who want to collect a lot of magical ore from the camp-owned mine to then blow it up and try to destroy the barrier this way. And then there's the swamp camp that I decided to join for this playthrough for no particular reason. They just smoke weed and are stoned most of the time. They divide themselves into novices, who are basically just drug dealers, Templars, who are religious warriors who fight with blades and magic, and the gurus, the spiritual leaders of the camp. All of them pray to an idol they call the Sleeper, and they think this godlike figure will get them out of their imprisonment at some point in the future. And until then, they just smoke. Also, this camp is the most atmospheric of them all, while also having the worst layout in the entire game. I get lost in there all the time, and it's even worse at night. There is a vendor who sells you a map of the camp, and as a first timer you absolutely need that to manage navigating through the camp. This bad layout is the point where the game reveals the cracks in its world design for the first time, even if doing all the quests and exploring your surroundings is fun to do. Those cracks also get obvious in other places in the world. For example, at some point you will have to visit the old mine that is obviously connected to the old camp, but for some reason it's placed right next to the new camp. And in this mine you will have to climb ladders, lots and lots of ladders, up and down and then back up again just to talk to a guy and finish a quest, and this is tedious. It's the same when you want to join the stoners in the swamp. You have to recruit a new member for them and you can't find him in the old camp. So you go from the old camp to the swamp to get the quest. Then you run back to the old camp to find the guy, then back to the swamp again, and if you've completed the way once, there won't be any new enemies in your way since they don't respawn, at least not now. This is just boring. Look, in my real life, I have no problem with repeating a certain task all over and walking the same way multiple times. But as much as I praise the game for feeling real, please don't feel too real in the wrong way. At least beating up people that I don't like without consequences is possible here, but please don't give me boring backtracking quests. Also, the game is no exception from the well-known fact that nobody ever likes escort quests. Again, this is like real life but bad. The guy I need to take to the swamp begins to follow me and I need to get him unstuck literally 5 seconds after beginning the quest. And then I lose him in the swamp camp and I need to reload. So the layout of the camp is so bad that even the NPCs get lost in there like a confused toddler in an IKEA. There are more quests like these and you will backtrack a lot. Especially in the beginning of the game you will run around from point A to B to A again and again. But it's not all bad, and as I already mentioned, it can be incredibly fun to explore your surroundings. You will find monsters to fight, secrets to uncover and hidden caches to loot. And while there are certain areas that just feel unfinished, you'll find so much cool stuff that it doesn't really matter. There is, for example, a hidden cave behind this waterfall, and I love details like these in games. And I also love hidden caves behind waterfalls, so I might be biased on this one. And now I think it's time to talk about the game's mechanics. And it's not as bad as people often say it is. The controls are certainly very weird at a first glance, since you do almost everything in the game with control in combination with one of the arrow keys. You attack, open doors and chests, speak to people, loot items, all with pressing a combination of those keys. And this seems extremely weird from a 2024 perspective, but from a 2001 perspective, this is also extremely weird. Nonetheless, I kinda like it. After playing like this for a while, you get used to it and it somehow is fun. No unnecessary keybinds means less to worry about from a mechanical player perspective, and this means more immersion. And this means more fun. And this means it's easier to forget about the state of the world and all of my problems, and this is cool. The combat controls come with a rudimentary combo system. You need to time your hits and blocks to activate it, which is also great and gives you a feeling of power and control. Nice to have this feeling for once in my life. This is also done by many modern games and it's universally appreciated, which makes Gothic ahead of its time, at least concerning this point. I've mentioned the game's immersion a few times now, and the developers managed to also do a good job of combining this immersion with some of the game's mechanics. When you do quests or kill enemies, you get experience points, and with them you get level ups. With level ups there come skill points that you can invest in the ability scores of strength, dexterity, mana, as well as in skills like fighting with specific weapons or picking locks. There are a lot of different skills and some of them are great, while others are completely useless, like sneaking or pickpocketing or my philosophy degree. What does this do for the immersion? Well, nothing, but you cannot just magically learn these skills anywhere in the world. You have to find someone who can train you.
Awaken.
I want to learn how to handle a two-handed sword.
Fighting with two-handed weapons requires certain levels of strength and dexterity. To wield a two-handed weapon, you will not only need to master your body, but your mind as well. Only if you master both mind and body will you be able to learn the skill. Concentration is the key. Body and mind unite in concentration.
And this drives home the 2 points of you getting stronger and the world being filled to the brim with capable people, which makes it feel real, and that is immersive. Oh, and also, the inventory has an unlimited capacity, which means that you don't need to worry about traveling from one end of the map to the other twice just to get your loot home. And while this doesn't seem that immersive at first, it still kinda is, since again, it makes the player's life, and with that the possibility of immersion in general, easier. And it also prevents the feeling of having to push urgent quests back because it takes hours just to find a vendor to empty out your inventory. I like this because I hate micromanaging my inventory in games, and I hate it when I have to store all my loot in a chest, travel to my home base, travel back to the chest again and get the rest of my stuff, all while being reminded of a big dragon or something that's currently attacking the town. Not that I care about the town, but there's also loot there that I want. Besides the mechanics, the graphics are okay. Not the best even for 2001, but they are really detailed. And this also does a lot for the feeling of realness, as well as the uniqueness of the game. There are only 2 games that have ever been made in the game's engine: Gothic and Gothic 2, who would have thought? And because of this, the distinct look that the games come in makes them really unique. While the graphics are neither the best nor the really bad, the sound design is amazing. It's some of the most atmospheric work I've ever seen in a game, and I absolutely love it. The little sound bits that make up the whole game world are extremely dense. Not only will the NPCs in the camps talk to each other and say different, more or less iconic one-liners to one another, depending on, for example, what time of the day it is, the voice lines will change. The animals, weapons and footsteps sound distinct from one another, are well made, and the whole world is brimming with different noises. When you go out into the swamp or stand next to a waterhole, you hear the flies buzzing around and the frogs ribbiting. When you stride through the grass, you hear crickets chirping, and when you are in the woods, you never feel at ease because of the densely packed ambient noise. All this leads to the world feeling alive, full of danger as well as opportunity, and this does a lot for the game being received as positively as it still is, I think. It makes the game incredibly atmospheric, even more so than just the graphical details. Besides all the ambience, the soundtrack of the game is really well done as well, and it is the basis for one of my favorite game OSTs of all time in Gothic 2. It is a good mix between moody ambient tracks and epic battle music, all while being backed by a somewhat dark undertone that fits the brutal theme of the world really well. And this theme is always there. In every bit, every corner of the colony you feel it. But it is also constantly undermined by a lightheartedness and a level of self-irony that the game throws at you. 2 things that, despite sounding almost diametrically opposed to each other, are very well put together to set the mood for the entire game. And this mixed tone that Gothic has and that somehow works is, apart from the look and the sound, another big part of the reason the game feels the way it does, feels so unique. And this uniqueness is reflected in the dialogues you can have with the NPCs.
Hi, I'm new here.
How nice for you.
Is that the old camp over there?
No, that's the new camp. The old camp is underneath the bridge.
Where do you think you're going?
To the camp.
You ain't come to make trouble, have you?
Sure. I plan to take on the whole camp.
Hey, this guy's funny. I don't like funny guys. Try that again, and you'll regret it.
I'd rather kill you, but the ore's not bad either.
How often have I told you bastards not to run through my hut?
What's your problem?
Leave me alone, man. Everyone's a problem with me. It all started when I built my hut. Don't build your hut close to the ditch, they said. But none of these bastards told me what would happen if I still did it. When I came back from the mine a few days ago, I had a second door. Those pigs, I hate them. I can't tell you how much I hate them. Now everybody runs through my hut. Every idiot.
How about your mother's a sheep shagging...
Yeah, I guess she is.
They are funny, they have a distinct kind of writing, and I swear they are even better in the original German. All the people in the colony are either crazy or pissed off, and almost no one is friendly to you, at least not without an ulterior motive. So you can basically imagine it as today's corporate America. It's harsh out there, and that's reflected in how the prisoners talk and behave. By the way, this also reflects a real-world tone of how people in the Ruhrpott talk to one another. That's the Ruhr area in Germany, a densely populated area of big industrial cities that also has a history of mining. The developers have their roots exactly there, and you feel it. And I just wanted to share this cool fact, I think. Except from some parts of the quest and world design, most parts of the game that I've talked about up until this point are positive. Gothic is unique, immersive, and it packs a punch when it comes to atmosphere. But in the beginning I said that some things in the game haven't aged well, so we also need to take another look at the bad parts, and we'll do that now as we have to talk about the story. And the story is not the best. And not even because it's boring or shallow, even if it is, no, mainly it's because of the pacing, I think. Gothic is divided into 6 chapters, and I've already told you what happens in the first of them. You explore. You explore the colony, the camps, get to know the people, and do some quests for them. And while there are technically often fetch quests or you've got to run between points of the map a lot, they are also unique and you can tackle a lot of them in different ways. This may not have many implications for the bigger story overall, but it gives you as a player some agency, helps with immersion and lets you feel like you're really in control of your character. There is, just as an example, a quest where you have to get rid of some business competitors for a guy in the swamp camp. And you can do that by just beating them up and killing them, or you can try to say the right things to them so that they just give up. This is a nice feature for the early 2000s. Also, again, this is not, hey you foul wretches, you have to stop, and then they give up. No, it still fits the tone of the world. It's brutal, and your character doesn't give 2 flying feces. But after chapter 1, the trouble with the pacing really begins. I've spent almost 7 hours in the first chapter, while only needing a bit more than 1 hour for chapter 2. And then chapter 3 is longer again, but not as long as chapter 4. The length of the chapters is neither constant nor is it consistent. It's not in or decreasing at a consistent rate, and that just feels wrong. It feels weird to spend so much time in the beginning part of the game and then just rushing through the rest of the story. It makes the narrative feel rushed, and that's never a good thing. And this culminates in chapter 6, the last one, only being about 20 minutes long. It makes the ending feel even more rushed than the rest of the story. But let me tell you what exactly happens. So, after we've joined the swamp camp, the gurus there want to invoke their sleeper, and for that they need a few things. So we fetch a magical focus stone, an ancient almanac, and venture into the old mine, where we find and fight a minecrawler queen. And I have to say that this was a proper horror moment for me as a kid, cause the thing looks disgusting, and you have to walk through total darkness to get to her. And when you light a torch, there are these weird alien tubes of flesh, and I hated it, which is very good. After that, we get back to the swamp to invoke the sleeper, and while doing that, the leader of the sect falls into a coma. And with that, chapter 3 begins. Now we have to explore a cool but very buggy dungeon. That's an old orcish burial site. There we get attacked by a madman who thinks he's speaking to the sleeper, and then the sect leader dies, and just before that realizes that they all have been deceived. The sleeper is evil. Wow, what a surprise. Well, okay, we then start working with the water mages who want to blow up the barrier from within. For that, we need to collect 4 more focus stones. And this is really stupid, because they are an absolute necessity for their plan, and the water mages didn't even think of collecting them at all until this point. And now they entrust this mission not to a trusted member of their community, but to a complete stranger. But who am I to question the wisdom of a mage? So we go and collect the stones, and while this is just a big old fetch quest, it's still kinda nice. Every stone comes with working together with a different character we already have met in Chapter 1 and with a different puzzle, and I use this term loosely, to get to the stone. While doing this, you explore the parts of the colony that were too dangerous up until now, and this is fun. It binds exploration to the story, and that's always a good thing. We also find some speed potions and a teleport rune, and this gives traveling through the world a much needed relief in tediousness. And that's Chapter 3. Longer than 2, shorter than 1, but it certainly is fun. Ha! That rhymed. What do you know? Then Chapter 4 starts, and a plot twist happens. The old mine collapses, and the leadership of the old camp goes mad. They kill all the fire mages, which is bad, cause the water mages need them for their big explodey ritual. Also, the old camp attacks the free mine, the one connected to the new camp. So we now have to, first, find another mage who can help with the ritual, and then free the mine. And we find the mage in the form of Xardas, a powerful necromancer who tells us that the Sleeper is in fact an evil demon and also responsible for the barrier getting out of control in the first place. If we want out, we have to kill him, and to do that we need help. This help comes in form of an orc who can tell us how to get into an underground temple where we can defeat the Sleeper, and of course, the orc can be found in the not so free anymore mine. So we make this mine free again and need to gather stuff so that he can build us a thing. And with that thing we can get into the orc temple without getting attacked. And as this all sounds very convoluted, we first tackle the last side quest of the game that is somewhat hidden in a ruined tower and you can just stumble upon it. It is just a riddle solving and stuff finding quest, but I like it, and you can only solve it if you're familiar with the map. Which you should be by now because you've run around it for hours. And that's Chapter 4. And here the pacing starts to get really weird, because you technically know what you have to do, and the twist with the old camp is neat. But there are so many little steps in between knowing your stuff and then being able to do something. You have to talk to a guy, another guy, and then another guy. And then you have to free the mine, find the orc, find a potion, back to the orc, then out of the mine, fight some beasts, loot some stuff, back into the mine, find the orc again, and that is hard because the mine is big and the layout is not easy to navigate, and just then you get the thing to get into the temple. This is very convoluted and could have profited of being a bit much more streamlined. And now Chapter 5 starts, and here the biggest issue of the story gets obvious. We make our way into the temple, and there we stumble upon riddles, traps, and the toughest enemies of the game. And I have to say that the atmosphere in this dungeon is amazing. It is dark, dangerous, and creepy, and also includes one of the biggest oversights the developers allowed themselves to get through playtesting. If there even was playtesting, which I am not so sure about because of all the bugs. There is a riddle where you have to shoot arrows at 2 targets at a wall to open a grate to move on. That alone isn't the problem. The targets aren't that obvious, but there are hints on what you have to do. But what if you play a melee fighter and didn't bring a bow? Well, then I guess you'll have to run all the way back through the temple to the outside, teleport to a camp, buy a bow, and then run back here. And that is a big problem. Why wouldn't you include a bow, at least somewhere in the dungeon to be found? If I would encounter this while playing the game for the first time, I would just quit. This is the culmination of the backtracking issues that are present in so many parts of the game's design. Luckily, I brought a bow and we can go on to kill 4 undead orc shamans who are responsible for invoking the sleeper in the first place. We find a strange sword that is shown to us in a video sequence, so it probably is important, and then we encounter the 5th shaman, the strongest of them all. And we find that out the hard way, since the guy is literally immortal. We cannot damage Orcimag Orcface here. As that could be a bit of a problem, we make a quick getaway and teleport back to Zardas. And now we have to run back through the whole dungeon to get to the surface to do that. Granted, some new enemies have spawned, but we are not being followed and this whole section is just more backtracking. Again, this is a really big issue, and this is also the point where the pacing of the story is taking a really bad turn. When you write a story, it should have a suspense curve of some sort. There can be some kind of mystery, a strange person doing something to the protagonist or something like that, and the people who consume the story get caught in the questions that arise from this persons or events. In Gothic, we first and foremost have the world we get thrown in, and while exploring this world, the player finds out the motives of the actions of the people living there. We find out about the ore barons in the old camp, the plans of the water mages, and about the sleeper. And this mysterious sleeper, that is not a god, though it is able to grant magical abilities and visions to the gurus in the swamp, is a big mystery. We find out more and more about this entity and also get attacked by the people worshipping it more than once. All of this, among other things, builds up the suspense. What is going on here? What is the sleeper really? Why is it responsible for the barrier getting out of control? Why didn't I make more out of my life? Do we have to fight the sleeper? Then we make our way to New Orc City, down into the temple, fight all the enemies down there, just to find out that we cannot go on and have to leave. This completely destroys any suspense that at least I have. This backtracking part destroys the momentum this story has. I don't want to go back, I want to go forward, and this could also be a point at which I put away the game for good. Why should I go on? I have no suspense anymore, and since the game does not allow me to go on and find out everything I want to find out about the sleeper, maybe even defeat it, why should I waste my time and keep playing? This is, at this point, just a badly designed story. And the backtracking issue gets even worse since, slight spoiler warning, we are going to have to go all the way back through the Orc City and the temple to where we found the immortal shaman once we are strong enough. As great as some things are in this game, this just sucks. It almost feels like they were trying to mimic the bad parts of reality again, where a stupid decision destroys my will to go on. Speaking of stupid decisions, it turns out that there is an old prophecy and we are a holy enemy of the orcs that they foresaw would defeat the sleeper and blah blah blah. This plot point is completely unnecessary, it does nothing for the story, and in my opinion it would be better if we were just some guy that waltzed into the colony and destroyed everything there, because it would be funnier and less boring. We then find a new armor and also a way to load up the sword we found in the temple with magic, cause apparently it is the only thing that can defeat the shaman. For that we steal all the magic from the magical ore that the water mages collected, make them very angry, and then can head back to the temple. And this is where chapter 6 starts. I mean, this is where the last 20 minutes of the game start. And for half of this time we have to go backtracking again. Arriving in the temple, it then is time to finally beat up my orc guy. And this is a really difficult fight. I mean, look at him. Look at his speed. I can barely keep up. After many tries, he falls to the magic of the sword and we can finally go forth to meet Zardas, who tells us that we are too late and the sleeper has already been brought back into this world. And then Zardoz falls asleep, because in an M. Night Shyamalan-like twist, the sleeper makes people fall asleep. And now the final fight begins. It consists of defeating a mad guru who stunlocks me, being shot at by the sleeper who stunlocks me, having to kill all these people who do a lot of damage, and defeating demons who do a lot of damage. This fight is harder than I remembered, while being really boring at the same time, which is an amazing achievement since there is a really fine line between being hard and boring, and this final fight manages to balance it perfectly. But in the end, the demon is defeated, and with a final cutscene, the game comes to an end.
When the sleeper was banished into his own dimension, I returned to daylight. The magic barrier had fallen. But for me, the adventure had only just begun.
Assessing Gothic is not easy. The game has some glaring pacing issues, and the backtracking-heavy game design, combined with some massive quest design oversights, can make playing it a tedious task. The story is also not the best, while I overall still like it. It's a classical high fantasy story of defeating an evil demon set in a not-so-classical gritty fantasy world. The chapter-like structure of the story is problematic as well. The chapters are of an incredibly inconsistent length. It feels weird to spend 7 hours or so in the first chapter and then just 1.5 in the second, while the 6th chapter is just 20 minutes long. It feels wrong to play through it like that, and after the first chapter you constantly feel like you missed something, since all the other chapters are so much shorter. And besides that, the game is just lacking polish. Because I played it in English, and also because it feels rough, missing parts, unfinished. There are so many points where something can just go mechanically wrong and you have to reload, especially when in dungeons or accompanied by an NPC. And there are so many bugs and glitches in Gothic. Please, just look at this and this and this.
May I pass through here? 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 May I pass through here?
You can also block not just incoming enemy attacks, but falling damage as well. And you can jump your way through the colony like your James McAvoy in Split. And you can hide in a barrel, which is weird since you can only hide in this one specific barrel, but it looks funny. Sadly, a lot of the funnier glitches have been removed in the modded version, but you absolutely still can find some in there. But this is not just bad. It is funny, and since the game doesn't take itself seriously most of the time, this doesn't take me out of the immersion. It just adds to the weirdness of the game's world. And this immersion is the best part of the game. The world feels amazing. It is alive, thriving, and just a delight to explore. And there are so many little touches that make it feel like that. The incredible sound design, the NPCs that feel like real people, animals in the world that are hunting each other. It is just so much fun to be a part of this world. Gothic also has mechanics that can almost make it feel like an immersive sim. You can pick up almost everything in the world or interact with wrenches to close the gate of the old camp, for example. And there is also a rudimentary crafting system that is not really polished, but you can cook meat and craft crude swords. The big issues the game has mostly become apparent in its second half, so there is this weird curve with the game going from one of the most immersive and amazing experiences in the first part to a tedious mess in the end. And if you are thinking of buying the remake, you should do yourself a favor and check out the original before that. And you don't need, and maybe even shouldn't, play through the entire game. Just jump into the world and play the first, maybe also the second and third chapter. Unless you hate yourself, then go ahead and play the whole game. I'm not stopping you. But the first half is enough to experience what people mean when they say Gothic is one of their favorite games. A lot of times it is just the first part, and I get it. It absolutely is the best part of this experience. And it is why people still love the game. It's immersive, set in an interesting world, has great sound design, and is very weird. And all of this forms an incredible experience, if you can ignore the glaring issues that float to the surface later, or if you just don't play that far. This is what Gothic has to offer. This is why it's considered cult. Thank you for watching. Really, thank you. This was a fun thing to do that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I finally got the courage to work through my depression and do it. If you liked it, you might consider liking it, or even subscribing if you want me to make more and steal more of your time, because if you want that, then I definitely will do that. Gothic still is one of my favorite games, and I would tell everyone that I know that you should try playing it. And even if not, either you can try out the remake when it comes out, or check out the massive modding community that the original still has, that I will link you down in the comics. Comics, yes. I will link that down in the comics. In the comments. Not even in the comments, in the video description. I should go to bed. Thank you for watching. This was fun. I hope you liked it. Bye.
May I pass through here? May I pass through here? May I pass through here? May I pass through here?